Hey everyone, welcome to my very first, the very basics of get to know your watercolor paint. You can use any watercolor paper, but just for the record, I am using Strathmore watercolor paper. And I'm using my White Nights watercolors like this, not the kind in the tubes. And I have this is my Paulina Bright brush. It's just a brush that I bought from an artist that I really like. But you could use any brush that's like a round, mid-size. Really, you can use any brush you please for this. So what I did was just draw some squares and rectangles. I see I made a mistake on this as a guide, and I just used a ruler to like space out some blocks, and I did a smaller square for the first one, and then I have some bigger ones, but that's really not that important. So the first thing I recommend you do to get to know your paints is simply fill in a box and try to make it as even as possible. So let's just take blue for the first one. We're going to really load the brush, and so we want this to be like showing what the color looks like at 100% opacity, I guess you could say. So we don't want it real watered down. I mean, of course you have to add water to it, but we don't want it to be watered down. So I'm just going to fill in this block with the watercolor. You gotta have enough water in it that it, flows off the brush. If it's too dry, it will kind of do this. Here, I'll try to do an example. See, it'll do that, but we want it to flow on. So it's a matter of finding the balance of enough water and enough pigment. And that's one of the reasons I think it's important to do exercises like this. It just helps you get to know your paint, to understand how it works. So I have the block on here, and I'm just kind of going over it to try to even out the colors. So there's the first one. So I'm going to go ahead and do this for several other colors. Green. I like to kind of go around the edge first and then fill it in. But honestly, it's however you feel most comfortable doing it. Oops. I'm not going to do every color, just the basics, so I guess I'll do brown. And then black is my last one. Now, if you are left-handed, you might want to start on the other direction because we'll be going this way, and if I was left-handed, you'd probably get your hand in the wet paint, unless you're going to let it dry in between, which is you can totally do. Okay, so the next phase of the exercise, I totally use a really bold pencil and it is smearing everywhere. Don't do that. So I'm going to erase it a little bit. Okay, so the next phase, I would like you to take each color and starting with, you know, 100% opacity like this one, and then gradually fade out to just the paper, like water, or a very light, very light version of that color. And doing this will help you start to understand, you know, how much water to use. So what I like to do is, I like to pre-moisten, yeah, gross word, I know, the paper a little bit. I need to clean this. An easy way to get a better control of what water, or a good way to get control of how much paint you have is to use your palette of some sort. So I can take some water here and just dab a little bit, so you're able to mix it with more water. Okay, so this is a little bit challenging, so you know, you might want to do this several times and just really work with it. So I'm just starting at the left side and I'm putting in a decent amount of color. So now that I have this color on there, I'm gonna rinse out my brush so it's has no paint in it, and I'm gonna go over it and pull it out towards the other side. And you know, you'll get a little bit too much pigment in your brush, so you just keep rinsing it and dab it on the paper towel or whatever to get the rest of the water out, so you can evenly distribute this. So yeah, that one looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. So we'll go, I'm going to try doing the next one without pre-moistening it, because I don't know if you should necessarily have to do that. So I'm loading a lot of paint on and doing the very left edge here. Now I'm going to rinse out my brush and get a lot of the water out and drag it over. And I'm going to do it again because I want it to fade a little more here. I had a little too much water in that time, as you can see. So it's a matter of just getting the hang of going back and forth between full strength and then adding water, dabbing out of, you know, the water out of your brush, etc. So let's do some yellow. And if you find that you have too much on this side, you can rinse out your brush and try to pick some up. You can do that for a little while with watercolors. Oh, I'm making a mess. See, this, I am a messy painter. Everyone doesn't believe me, but yeah. I'm constantly fixing my mistakes from smearing stuff. Okay. Oops. Okay. Okay, let's see. So now we're going to experiment with wet on wet. So the paints act totally different depending on what the paper is like underneath. So let's just try with regular water, which I'm going to change my water because it's really nasty right now. Okay, got some clean water. So first we'll play around with just putting water down first. So I'm just going to fill this block with a decent amount of water. Now I'm going to pick up some blue, and you can play around with how it, all you have to do is touch it and it flows into the other parts. I love that. And if you take another color, just how it acts going into the other color. Honestly, it's just about experimenting. Now, if you fill the whole block in with green and it's totally wet, like I'm not going to let it dry at all. Let's play around with what it does with a decent amount of blue on it. So anyway, you don't have to fill in every block, obviously. It's just so you can play around and get a feel for how they can blend together with wet on wet. Which leads me to one of the other exercises I would like to try is doing a gradient from one color to another. So let's do orange to red. So I'm gonna put a decent amount of orange there, and I'm gonna put red on this side. Okay, sorry about that. I got cut off. But you really didn't miss anything. All I did was blend these two together as another exercise. I also went ahead and just did a few more spots of color here because the next thing I'd like you to play around with is just dry on dry technique. And so I just did a swatch of color and it's totally dry. So all this is just playing around with how the dry reacts to dry, which it's pretty much just like painting on regular paper. If you make the paint on your brush extra dry, you can do, you know, more like a technique that looks like a brush stroke. I don't know how else to describe it. You can also layer, which you can't really layer unless the bottom layer is dry. Now, the one thing about watercolors is the layer underneath can lift up if it gets too wet and you work with it too much. So when you do another layer, you shouldn't work with it too much or that will happen. So just to show you what I mean by that, I just did that, and usually I would just let it dry. But now, if I went over this a lot, as you can see, the color underneath is starting to come up. Which is a good tip as well. Like if you screw up, you know that you're not totally trapped. You can possibly save it. So yeah. Just playing around. I guess did I say dry on dry? That's not exactly what I meant. Wet on dry. Or a dry brush technique, which the dry brush is whenever it's really dry and you get these strokes. Anyway, basically the point of this is to, once again, just get to know your paint. I really encourage you to do this and do it a lot. Do it several times with different brushes, maybe different paints if you have more than one type, because they're all a little bit different. And, you know, a lot of people were like, how do I even begin doing an actual painting? Well, I can help you do that, but it will be so much easier if you understand how the paint works and reacts with each other, and then you get that, like, is it a muscle memory? I don't know. You get that memory and it'll be so much better. So yeah, let me know if you tried this or if it was helpful to you, and if there is something specific you would like for the next video, please let me know. Thank you so much for being a patron. Love you.